We're back this morning on Chronicle talking about the efforts to reduce crime in the city, especially in the summer as more young people are out of school. Joining me now, Lieutenant Marcus Taylor, a gang unit officer with the Omaha Police Department. Marcus, what do you make of this recent crime spike?
Well, we seem to see this every summer. Most of the crime spikes are not just random. It's often due to targeted individuals who have beefs or feuds. And so that's the good news, is that it's not just random violence. It's often due to ongoing feuds or beefs that we are looking into and that we do take very serious, and we respond accordingly.
So I know sort of when one shooting happens, you guys are out on the streets making sure the next one doesn't happen. How do you work with people that are on the streets to know who could be targeted next?
Well, for one, we work hand in hand with the community. More so in my 19 years of law enforcement, Omaha, the community that we have, the engagement is much better than what it's been in the past. And that's a testament to the efforts made by 360 and us being mindful of those relationships. So when we have a shooting, absolutely right, we hit the street, we take those investigations serious. We work together very collaboratively amongst the units as well, as far as the different units, from assault to homicide to gang unit, on a regular basis.
We've heard that it's a lot of juveniles recently who have been involved. Is that a newer trend that you're seeing, or is that something you've experienced in your time on the force?
As far as the violence that we're seeing with the juveniles, that is kind of a new trend for the past year or so that we're constantly working towards and working on, working with our community partners. We're also making sure that we're very proactive in our investigative techniques to when we see juvenile-related violence, that we respond with every resource that we have to address that.
What do you think factors into that? Was it kids being out of school in the pandemic, or is there one reason, or is it many?
I think there's several reasons. I think the pandemic played a role in that, and some of the mental health factors there. I think there's a social media component where we've seen a number of beefs or tiffs rise up from ongoing access to social media, and things kind of get sparked. There's also a cycle of, once violence happens in one incident, that there's a cycle of retaliation, and so we see that as well. And then again, that social media may play a role in kind of stoking those fires.
Is that something you guys are keeping track of too? Do you monitor social media for instances like that?
Yes, we do. We do monitor social media. We also respond to tips that the community give us as well.
Would you say that this rash of violence that we've had recently is something to be fearful of, or is Omaha a safe city?
I believe with my whole heart that Omaha is definitely a safe city. Again, our numbers show that our numbers are still comparable and lower than what they've had been in the past. Again, I emphasize that it's often targeted, so it's not random, where just an average citizen is the target of this violence. And so it's definitely a safe city. I feel comfortable in that and confident in that.
What are gang unit officers doing day in and day out to get ahead of that violence outside of just the shootings?
Well, for one, we engage the community. So we go out and when we're invited to make presentations, we're proactive in that. We go to schools, churches, with prayer walks when that violence happens, to show our support. In addition to that, we follow up on ongoing investigations. Again, gang unit is called upon a lot. I have some great sergeants and officers who are very proactive and following up on ongoing investigations. And when calls are hot, they respond to those hot calls on a regular basis.
How do you build the trust with the community that maybe they have information that next person may be targeted, or that they know who did something? How does a gang unit work to build that trust?
I think it's through relationships and being genuine, showing them our hearts, showing us that commitment to where we show up at every incident. We follow through and follow up. Even when people aren't comfortable with talking to us, we build that rapport for the fact that, again, we want peace in the city, and I think that comes through. And the relationships we've been able to build through those investigations, some of the success that we've had, that's been very beneficial for us.
And you're at these 360 meetings weekly. I mean, you present, you give people the nitty-gritty of what's going on. You hold nothing back. Is that something that the department should keep up, that transparency?
Absolutely. People want transparency. They want that genuine feedback. We're in this together. Like we can't do it by ourselves as police. And so when people saw the success that we've had by working together, I think they just want to keep that winning formula going, and that's important to us.
What have you seen grow with 360 over the past 19 years that you've been on the department? It's been in effect for about 15, but what has changed?
What I've seen change is that relationship. I mean, we get smiles, I get waves and high fives, and I've seen the environment just change within the community, and I've seen people have a heart towards the community members. Not that we weren't investigating things right in the past. I just think with that relationship, we have a lot more quality investigations because we're receiving information that people didn't have that trust or didn't feel comfortable with telling us in the past. And that when you build a relationship, people feel more comfortable, makes our investigations that much more effective to help the citizens, and that's our ultimate goal.
I know you guys do a lot of community policing. You can see Facebook posts of basketball hoops going up, or just ice cream on the street, or down at Miller Park for a water balloon fight. What do you hope that people take away from you or learn about the gang unit?
I think that despite our vests, despite sometimes how they may see us, we're here for this community. We care about the community. We're here for their safety. They want to see us as human beings that have love for the people in the community, and that we're just here to help. And if that means going towards the violence and trying to stop it, then we're prepared to do that. But if we could give out hugs and high fives and ice cream and it was peace, we'd much rather do that than responding to gunfire or shots fired or the incidents that we sometimes get every now and again in this city.
Thank you, Lieutenant Taylor. And next on KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle, we're joined by two members of the Empowerment Network to talk about how they are tackling crime and youth violence issues. But first, a reminder that your comments are an important part of this show. If you want to be heard, email your comments to news@ketv.com. Remember, we love hearing from you. We'll be right back.